Peace and blessings, family. This is Brother Shareef and Ptah Shakur with the Hour of Power. We have a very special guest this week, but before we get started, we will open up with our universal prayer and our nugget of truth and a couple announcements. Then we'll get right into this much anticipated and needed interview with our brother here. In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful, we give him praise and thanks for his mercy and his goodness to the human family. If all the trees upon the earth were pens to write with, and if all the oceans were ink, and then another 7 oceans to add to its supply, the writing would still not be enough to explain the glory of God, for he's the gracious, the merciful. And even if I lived to be 1,000, it would still not be enough to thank God for his many blessings and gifts. We confide in no other in our time of need, and we praise no other in our good fortune. He is one. We thank God for the Metu Netter, oracles, scriptures, and writings that came on the continent of Africa thousands of years before any organized religion. We thank God for Moses in the Torah, Jesus in the Gospel, and Muhammad with the Quran. I greet everyone in words of peace. To my Christian family, praise the Lord. To my Muslim family, assalamu alaikum. To my Hebrew Israelite family and my Jewish family, shalom. To my Black conscious family, hotep. To my people in the streets, what's good to you? And that all means peace. So this is Brother Shareef with the and Ptah Shakur with the Hour of Power. We start out most of our programs with a nugget of truth. A nugget of truth is just us explaining our history, since it's not being properly explained in learning institutions. My brother will go deeper into what I'm talking about these streets being named after our heroes and sheroes here, and we had an incident, and the brother's going to explain it more, where someone was trying to make this a character issue. This book here, it's called The Hidden History of Washington, D.C. It is documented that Christopher Columbus and his henchman named Michelle Sweno, it's the first recorded rape in the New World. I want to repeat that. It is the first recorded rape in the New World. Sweno, which was a henchman of Christopher Columbus, when they made their first trip to the New World, he captured a beautiful Indian woman and had his way with her. With Columbus' blessings, Sweno wrote, he took the woman into his cabin, and her being naked in her custom, he conceived the desire to execute to be with her, but she was unwilling for me to do so. She entreated me with her nails so that he would wish that he never even started to have sex with her. And and seeing this, he took a rope and thrashed her well, following which she produced a scream and a wailing that caused your ears not to believe. Finally, they reached an agreement to have sexual relations. This is the first recorded rape in the New World, Christopher Columbus. And a lot of people don't know Christopher Columbus never actually came to America. He only came to the islands. And he actually made 2 trips to the New World. On his way back from the first trip, we have pictures of him being arrested by Queen Elizabeth because of some of the people that came with him on the first trip told Queen Elizabeth that he didn't go and do what he was supposed to, which was to see if the world was flat. He was ravaging the people. So she actually had Christopher Columbus arrested, and he said, no, wait, we can make money off of these people because they have no weapons, they can't defend themselves. So he actually made a second trip to the New World, but this one was more savage because he brought starving dogs with him, and they ravaged the people in the islands with wild, savage dogs. This is the history of Christopher Columbus, and he has Columbus Street, Columbus University, almost every American city, as talked about in this book, has an Christopher Columbus street. So America is in no position to talk about character when it comes to naming streets and blocks, as my brother will go deeper into. So that's this week's nugget of truth. In this book, with the first recorded rape, it talks about the hidden history of Washington, D.C., but it just goes into that about Christopher Columbus. Turn it over to my brother.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that bit of information. And if you haven't tuned into the program before, this is the most powerful hour. This is the hour of power. So this is where you can come and get this deep history. Come get educated, motivated, and get inspired. So before we go and interview our wonderful guest that we have today, just to remind everybody, this is coming out live on the White Rose Community Channel 16 and 18, as well as it's being streamed over Facebook, as well as YouTube as well. This is a program designed for you. We want to hear from your voice. We want to hear if you have any type of business ideas, entrepreneurs, ideas that can benefit our community. We want to hear from our youth. We believe our youth are our future. So if we want to hear these positive stories. We see so many negative stories that when you pop on your TV screen. We want some feel-good story. So if you got youth that are going into entrepreneurship, whether they're going to the military, whether they're going into any type of endeavors that add to our community, we want to hear that. And we want to hear diverse opinions. Whatever you have, if you have it on your chest, we believe in order for us to unite and to grow together, we need to hear you. So regardless of what your acronyms is, regardless of what your religious persuasion is, or whatever your political ideology, we want to hear that at this particular program. So this program is going from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. on the White Rose channel. And for those that's on Facebook and YouTube, we will continue a bit later on. Call-in numbers on the bottom of the screen, 717-846-5067. And lastly, what I want to mention is this upcoming Sunday here in York, PA, is the men's mental health wellness walk at 9 a.m. We're going to do this every Sunday at 9 a.m., rain or shine, most likely. You can show up and join in the brotherhood, join in wonderful conversation with well-meaning individuals that's trying to do something positive to the community. So that's this upcoming Sunday, 9 a.m. there at Penn Park. Just join the vibration. So back to you, Shareef, and introduce our guest.
Yes. So, not that you need any introduction, but introduce yourself, my brother.
Oh, you are too kind. Too kind. I'm humbled to be here. I love this platform. Thank you for extending the invitation to myself, Brother Shareef. I watch often, of course, as much as possible. I know I interact. I know I see Ptah in the comments, so y'all know I like to click through. I'm often working, so I don't call. But I would like to see some folks call in today.
For sure.
I thrive most off of dialogue. Part of what really disturbs me with some of the interactions we've had lately is when you mention positivity.
Yes, sir.
And growth in terms of a community, we don't get to see much positivity these days. A lot of doom and gloom and a lot of discontinuity when it comes to our people in terms of not only how we reflect upon ourselves, but how we reflect outside of what we know.
Yes, sir.
Because within the community, we see ourselves one way. That's not always highlighted properly.
Yes, sir.
So when I see someone like Brother Shareef bring forward requests to honor people that we all know should be exalted, it was striking to me to see that we had at least some people in our local government that would want to curtail that activity, that would want to stop that positivity, kill it at the root. The way that I saw it was as a de facto ban on these requests for these honorary street namings. Wasn't calling for the streets to be named themselves, only to be dedicated. Don't we have that right? That's the way that Brother Shareef would bring it forward. Unfortunately, we're not targeting Councilwoman Jonescu. I think that I made plain and clear at the last meeting when Councilwoman Jonescu introduced a bill to give some structure to these requests for the honorary street names.
Yes, sir.
One of the things that I mentioned was you can build structure, but to build a structure, you do not have to build barriers. Part of what the councilwoman wanted to implement in terms of applying this structure to the honorary street naming process, application fees. Of course, we don't know how they would arrive at these application fees. It said $50. The installation fees. If Brother Shareef would make a request, for example, you've, I believe, mentioned publicly Mr. Robinson is somebody that we would like to exalt. We like to do this publicly. And I would wholeheartedly support this. Now, we would have to actually come together And if this were to pass the way that Councilwoman John Askew put it forward, we would have had to raise funds to pay for the upkeep, the installation, and of course the application fees. We would have had to secure signatures from 2/3 of the current residents for whatever street we would want to have dedicated. That's a problem for me.
Okay.
Not only because of the discontinuity that we know that we have, this discontinuity is not always through a fault of our own. Okay? A lot of times it's by consequence of a broken system that leaves us displaced. In many, many different ways, this is something that still occurs. Think of how many times there's areas, say out west, I hear Mr. Kirkland often, through that oral tradition, he breaks down history. And there's areas that have been entirely displaced, where if you went to certain streets out west and asked them, do you know this person? You'd be shocked that some of them might even be related, but they wouldn't know. They don't understand that legacy.
True.
And when you get to legacy, one of the more striking aspects was the element within this amendment language, because it was going to amend an existing bill, simply to add these barriers to these requests, was that after 10 years, any honorary street names would sunset. I'm calling it a sunset clause because they would revert back to, I guess, dishonor, because the honor would be removed. Now, something I said at council is that permanence is at the essence of legacy.
Yes.
You must have that continuity.
Yeah.
Why would you peel it back after 10 years? Myself, I found that rather repugnant and insidious. I do not see where that would meet any legitimate public interest, where we would want to peel back history and peel back legacy and make sure that it only has a defined timeline of 10 years. That struck me in particular. So much the money, perhaps, but money can be raised. Resources we can argue over, but I don't think that legacy should be up for discussion. I don't think that legacy should be treated in a way that it's disposable and that we can so easily and casually discuss erasing it.
Brother Manuel, isn't it correct some of the language of this supposed bill or act was if anyone has controversy or behind their name or a record or something, they would be disqualified, or that would be a reason to disqualify them for having a street name. Is that correct?
It is. Unfortunately, if you were to review that amended, what would be the amended language for the bill, it would appear in committee. They pulled it at the last second. Although they pulled it, we thought it wise to give them this early feedback, let them know we're quite displeased with even the thought and the consideration for this type of bill. Within there, it did mention that if there's any controversy, that's the word, of course they don't define it. If there's any controversy, they just left it there arbitrarily, that this person that we would want to honor would no longer be eligible for said honor. Now, who defines controversy? And who would also qualify? Many times, to stand up is controversial on its face, by default. Well, we do not let ourselves be guided by that. Unfortunately, that was one of the... I'm going to tell you something, and I mentioned this at council. Often what we see here at city council locally, there's a lot of copy-pasted legislation. It comes from other municipalities. They've even messed up. Sometimes they'll copy and paste legislation from one municipality, introduce it here, and leave the municipality where they copied it from, leave the names in the language sometimes. You could see some of that where it happened here, but you could also see where they shoehorned some of that very, very localized language, such as the controversy, where you can see they were trying to attach a stigma to something where a stigma should not exist. And again, placing those barriers, which are arbitrary, and it's clear they're insurmountable. Because if you give the power to the state, the government, to ascribe to us, those of us that are controversial and not worthy of uplifting, then where does that leave us in terms of determining our own legacies and making sure that the visibility for these legacies is actually something that we put in place? I think that the momentum that you were building with these requests perhaps made some people upset. I don't know who. I can't say it's Councilwoman Jonescu, but unfortunately
That's
for
what I was gonna
Councilwoman
ask you.
Jonescu,
Okay.
she's the sole sponsor. And she's the only one that we know that introduced it.
Interesting.
Now, part of what she wanted was bizarre. You would have to go to the Traffic Safety Committee, and the Traffic Safety Committee would have to approve it. Not even when we put the wall on George Street, the city put the wall on George Street, which I affectionately call it the wall. That didn't go by the Traffic Safety Committee, and guess what? It shouldn't have. It didn't actually alter the traffic pattern. That's why it didn't. So why would a street naming or honorary street dedication have to pass through the Traffic Safety Committee? To me, what it signals is somebody that's been involved in all of these municipal affairs for so long, appearing at council, having the privilege to participate with council as they engage in their policy making. I could see it was just another way to shoehorn another barrier into the process.
So let me see if I can understand. I'm gonna share it for my
Break it
novice
down, however
understanding.
you want to
So,
break it down.
as a result of the street naming, or is it street naming, block dedication? I don't know.
dedication.
Block dedication. The city enacted an amendment. You're saying
They were going to introduce it.
Okay.
Yeah. So the process at York City Council, let's start from the top. It's good that you looped it back. When a bill or a resolution is introduced at council, sometimes they do proclamations, but let's stick to bills and resolutions.
Okay.
It first goes through the committee process.
Okay.
That's just duly legislated. That is the due course.
Yes, sir.
It first goes through committee. Well, it appeared in committee and then was pulled at the last second. So it never even made it to the committee so that we could flesh it out there. But Brother Ptah, we weren't going to wait. We weren't going to wait.
Okay.
And I think it was most prudent to go at it the way that we did.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I didn't want to drag Councilwoman Jonescu, but we had to make it plain where our issues were and what we identified as problematic with this amended language that never made it to committee. And what I've heard, the most recent update, we have it on good authority that this will not rear its head once more.
Okay.
This doesn't mean we're going to sit on our duffs. This doesn't mean that we're going to pull back.
Yes, sir.
We're still as affirmative in what we believe.
Okay.
Our opinions and our stances remain just as strong. But what I would like to see myself is a dialogue. And this is what I brought up at council. We should have dialogue all throughout the policy-making process. So there's something like this. A council person shouldn't even suffer themselves the embarrassment of putting something like this forward. For a council person to be quite so out of touch. And I gotta say something. Think of somebody like Mayor Helfrich even, who I consider a historian in his own right. I don't think that Mayor Helfrich himself, I haven't had any discussions with him. I can't see how he would have been down with this. I've sat at the York History Center and listened to some of his history lectures, along with Mr. Kirkland and others.
Oh, really?
And oh yeah. And if you didn't know better, you wouldn't know he was the mayor. You would just think he was just some historian. Goes around giving lectures. He goes deep.
Okay.
When he got into the daguerreotypes and the first black photography, what are those things that they use? They're called daguerreotypes, and there's another name. And he broke that all down. Let me tell you, went in deep. So I know this is somebody that treasures history. I can't imagine that something like this was broadly consulted.
And he's the one that approved the block dedications of
that's
brother,
a good point.
Mr. Keith Beatty, rest in peace, Ahmed Saifullah,
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace, and our brother John, who is alive, and we wanted to give him, his flowers. That's why I really pushed for that. And I told Brother John that I was going to do that for him last year when we and him was going our way to Baltimore, and we talked about the street, the block dedication for Brother Ahmed. I said, this is fine and well, but too many times we do things for people who have passed away and not those who are alive. I said, I'm gonna name a street after you, well, a block after you, since you're with us. And he just laughed. But when I felt like the God above directed me that way, because that's what I do in the morning. I say, God, what do you want me to do? And that's what led me a couple months ago to request it for Brother John because I know he was much deserving of it. And if I may, going into what's her name, the councilwoman?
Councilwoman Teresa Jonescu.
Okay, I think she was looking at it. We're on our power now, so we can speak it. I think she was looking at it as we're going to stop this person. He'll have this whole city named after black people. But like I said yesterday at the city council, all we're doing is catching up to other civilized American cities. You go to Baltimore, Philadelphia, Chicago, all kind of things are named after black and Latino people. Murals on gyms, buildings, and they're not just dedicating blocks. They're renaming streets, especially after Martin Luther King. When I was just in North Carolina, they renamed a street Martin Luther King Boulevard, long, boulevard. So if she's getting intimidated by a block dedication, we're only catching up to any other civilized American city.
When my aunt had come here and being older, first arrived here to the States. Now she's black. She's not light skinned. She's black. And when she went to Philadelphia after being in New York, I remember her remarking. She was happy. She said, "All the murals." She said, "All these murals are black people. You don't see that in York."
Right.
And she remarks this, and I think that sometimes people that are in York, they don't tend to see things but a certain way. We get used to our environment. Because you're in this environment, it becomes your entire objective reality. Until you get out, you start seeing different perspectives. These are all valid points. I had some conversations with people that I respect. I like to consult with others. I like to always engage in dialogue. And they asked me, how much of this do you think is a race issue? And I said, well, why would you pose the question to me? Why would you pose that question to me?
Talking about the street naming?
Right. Why would you pose this question to me? And part of it is because I don't think that's for us to answer. Because we're not the ones that put this forward. Unfortunately, we haven't had a dialogue yet with Councilwoman Jonescu. Of course, I will always welcome it. I do believe that it will arrive. It will arrive in its own time. But for us, we still won't relent. My thing is, imagine the indignity of having to peel something back after 10 years. I couldn't imagine it. Going back and we say, well, you have Brother Cypher Law, we're not going to peel this back. Brother John's dedication, we're going to peel it back. That sunset clause bothered me more than anything else, more than the financial aspects. Even the controversy clause, the sunset clause, was to me the most insidious aspect of it because of the direct indignity associated with that clause. That's not something that I would have wanted to see pass. When it comes to council, often it's an empty room, unfortunately. We don't have the opportunity to guide policy the way that I believe that we should as a people. And this is all people. But as you said, this is our power. We're going to speak in some very specific ways. Now, as black and brown people, we have the privilege and the ability to be present. We should be present, always be present. I've always made it my thing that I appear as you would see me in my community. I don't put on a suit. I don't cosplay. A lot of it is very intentional. For one, most people know me here. They've made up their mind. I disagree that I wouldn't need introduction. One should always have a, of course, honorable introduction and a humble introduction. I'm not one of those, of course, that I believe that everybody knows who I am. Never. That's never the case. Especially think of York, where how much of York now is a recently arrived population? So much of York.
Yeah, I was
so much of York
for being here. Yeah.
And we always got to keep that in mind. At council, what I tell people when they're apprehensive about approaching council or even discussing these things, because I'm a policy hack, it comes natural to me. You simply have to look at something and say, is this being done to us? Or is it being done alongside with us? It's easy to look at something like what Councilwoman Jonescu was putting forward and say, this is something that's being done to us. And that's just how you have to break it down. Now, where you arrive within that framing, that's a different story. Because we're going to want different things. You're going to be comfortable with certain things. I'm not going to be comfortable with certain things. Brother Ptah might have an entirely different vision. But as long as we know what's being put forward, meets some public interest that we know we're not being left out, then we should be good to go forward with it. Now, with something like this, that just wasn't the case. So we had to make sure to get in there and get in there at the right time. We weren't going to wait. I'm cautious about things because I've seen too many times where something will be put forth on the local level, and for whatever reason, there's not enough participation, not enough input, not enough dialogue. By the time we try to undo the knot, listen, it's not the same thing. It takes too many resources. It becomes too sensational. It becomes too entrenched.
Yes, sir.
It becomes a lot more difficult to peel things back. I didn't want that to happen with this. It wasn't intended to bring controversy, but I will admit it, I agitate. To call it the Shareef Hameed Act, that was something I did intentionally, and it was all in due respect. But if you come up there humdrum, and you just approach it from a policy perspective, it's a lot more likely to slide through. Sometimes you got to bring a little bit of spark to it.
Fire.
And I hope that you didn't misunderstand it, of course, and I hope that you were comfortable with that.
I knew exactly.
And understood my approach when I named it the Shareef Hameed Act, because part of it was in jest, but also part of it was because I knew that it was a reactionary approach to the course of action that Shareef Hameed was bringing forward.
Yes, sir.
And for me, it's the Shareef Hameed Act at that point. Let's put it plain.
And like I had discussed with you when you made me aware of this, I already knew this was coming. I just didn't know it was going to come that soon and be that detailed. But
I don't know how he knew. I got to tell you, I got to give it up to the brother. And I'm not just saying this because, perhaps because it's my vantage point, I did not see something like this materializing this way. The way I saw it happening, potentially, if there was going to be any strife with this type of thing, would be that there would be behind the scenes. Tie you up bureaucratically. In other words, put so many steps to do things. I could name you names. I could name you all kinds of the Trey and Boot Classic, where things go behind the scenes. Sometimes it bubbles up forward, but they do things behind the scenes to keep things from happening. Usually, it's not so brazen. Now, I will say this. Now, I use the word, I've used it before. And of course, it just means rookie. It means new jack. It means newly arrived. When you have a neophyte council member, sometimes they don't know how to or when not to show their hand. And I think that when you have a neophyte like Councilwoman Jonescu, they perhaps overestimate their ability to influence what they're trying to influence at that particular time. Well, it wasn't going to happen that day. I don't think we should ever sit on our duffs. We should always participate, always be forward, always be ready. We're not always going to agree, but we should always be there ready to give this input, because for me, the preservation of history is something that has always been deep in York and something that I always appreciated not being from here. How many people can tie together the legacies between families, within their families, between areas, among areas? That's deep. You don't see that everywhere. There's a specific continuity here. That's a specific tradition. Let me tell you, as somebody not born and raised here, that doesn't get appreciated here. For me to see that potentially being cut off in any way is deep for me. It also bothered me, and I'm going to make this point, and I didn't make it at City Council. The branding now for downtown is historically edgy. Now, I'm going to admit it. If I put another hat on, I think it's...
You said historically edgy?
Historically edgy. That's their branding if you pull it up now. I think it's actually kind of dope for what they're pushing from a marketing perspective. Well, if it's historically edgy and that's part of what you want to bring forward and you think that's what brings enrichment and that's worthy of a brand, well, why, when you bring forward legacies and historic aspects that arise from our communities, it's not well accepted? It would appear to be not well accepted to me, because that was a de facto ban. The language that would have amended the bill, that amendment was a de facto ban. In other words, they were putting a stop to the honorary dedications. You'd have had to raise funds. You had to do all these things, putting too many arbitrary barriers between you and the legacies that you wanted to catapult for all to see. That's a de facto ban. Now, why? How does that jive with this historically edgy place? What are you telling us?
I see where you're going with
Let's
that.
put it plain.
I'm with you.
But it's in tune with when America feels threatened, they like to end trends. That goes all the way back to slavery, you know. when what they say in the Willie Lynch letter. You get the biggest, baddest one on the slave plantation, bring him out in front of his mother, his grandmother, his children, and you whip him within.
Don't get buck.
Yeah, so the real underlining meaning wasn't the beating; it was stopping him from influencing others for them, being against the slave master, being a problem. So that's what they did in slavery times. If it was a trend, they stopped it. So it was the same idea with her coming out with this de facto ban, especially, act, especially that soon. We're not going to let him name
it's a ban.
the rest of this city with all these people. So
that would have been a ban.
Yeah,
I haven't had a chance to dialogue with her. I don't know where she came up with this.
Well, she had backing. She didn't.
Oh,
that's not on.
I could tell you
not
from
on her. That's not on her own.
I could tell you from
this man needs to be stopped. Ahmed, Saifullah, Keith Beatty, now Brother John. This needs to stop.
Well, if they had a controversy, well then let's talk about the controversy. Now, if you want to have a discussion about controversies, we can have them. Now, you mentioned Christopher Columbus. There's a bust. You guys know there's a bust of Christopher, sculpture. There's a bust of Christopher Columbus's likeness in front of the old courthouse. Now, it's a bizarre form of cancel culture when the cancel culture is directed at us and they want to cancel the legacies that arise from our communities. But what's clearly repugnant still remains in place. But they're going to have history. They're going to have things that they call out. Well, if that's good to do for someone like Christopher Columbus, now why wouldn't it be good to do for someone like Brother Saifullah, Brother Jameson? And for me to cut that off, it's the positivity that I was feeling, that it seemed to bring strife to certain elements. And then to see that manifest as a policy. And I told Brother Shareef straight up, and I don't just say these things, I'm not sure how he would have seen it coming, but he must have, because he was just as calm as he is now. He said, well, listen, he said, Manuel, listen to me, brother, I thank you for this, but I knew it was coming. And then I paused, and I said, and I hope you don't mind me sharing this.
No.
And I paused, and I said, Brother Shareef, what do you mean? He said, it had to come this way. I just was wondering when. I said, but how would you know? Because I didn't expect it this way. I know it would start something. It's going to agitate in certain ways. When you call out certain histories in York, that's just the way it's going to be, and it's probably going to be like that for a very long time. Right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But I never expected those specific policy elements to appear in something that would be so brazenly put forward. Part of me wanted to just let it sit so it could actually end up in committee. I'm not even going to lie.
Okay.
Just because I said to myself, wait a second, if you really let this take off, that's more to our favor, because there's no way that we would then let that momentum be lost. Does that make sense?
Okay.
But then at the same time, I didn't think that was just too wise.
Our history and us honoring our brothers and sisters in York has been buried so long. It's come as a wave recently. Brother Ahmed, Keith Beatty, Brother John, Mr. Simpson.
Do you think there would be grants if this was something that was going on? You think they would be throwing money at the initiative if it was something from another community? They would say, you know what, bring more honorary dedications. Here's some money. Here's some grants. But with this stream of activity, you want to bury it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know. This is coming a wave in a short amount of time. They're like, hold on, this is too much and more to come. I'm gonna be honest. I'm not stopping. I'm not stopping there.
I've heard you mention Mr. Rollison.
Mr. Rollison.
Oh man, that's just one for me.
Mr. Preston.
G.
Oh,
Mr. Preston.
Shout out KP.
I've already have something in the works with him, with the permission of his daughter and family. I believe he deserves it, and so that all we're doing is catching up to other civilized American inner cities. This is normal, and other ethnic groups embrace it. I just spent a weekend in Cambridge, Maryland, with a friend, and she took me to the Harriet Tubman Museum. That whole city is almost named in honor of Harriet Tubman. And when I went to the museums, it was mostly white people there, you know, because she did so much in that area with her helping the slaves be, you know, released and freed. That's Cambridge, Maryland. It's almost, that whole place is almost in honor of her. I posted, you know, the pictures. So, like I said, this isn't nothing to be afraid of. Embrace it.
You had to be very intentional, I think, to arrive at that sort of broad acceptance. You have to be very intentional as a community. I don't think that that just happens by mistake. That's why, for me, to bring something like this forward, for the people that don't understand it, they don't have to. And for anyone that says, is this racial? Are you making it racial? How are we making it racial? We're not the ones that try to put a stop to it.
Right.
I shouldn't have to answer that question.
Right.
If I'm the aggrieved, why are you asking me why somebody is perpetrating any act against me? Well, you go ahead and explore that with them. I'm going to give you the proper response regardless. Quite honestly, I don't care about the reason. For me, whether it's racially motivated or not, you're going to get the same response. It's up to us to make sure that if it is racially motivated, we know exactly how we're going to address this.
Right.
But whether they have something in their heads or not, that's not really going to determine my course of action, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Because that's not on me.
I just want to interject real quick. For everybody who's watching this right now, this is coming out live here on the White Rose Community Channel 16 and Channel 18. This is a call-in number. This we're going to be going live on those particular channels up until 9 p.m. Then we will go extended if we need to on Facebook as well. And so we have a wonderful guest, Manuel Gomez. There's been certain litigation and certain, I guess, policies that was put forth to try to limit what we've got going on as far as the street dedication. So we want to join the conversation, share what's on your mind. I do want to share that Miss Dolores, thank you for tuning in. She just mentioned this. We can go into this a little bit. She said, Emmanuel, we need to encourage people from the Hispanic community to attend the city council meetings for better support and understanding. So I don't know if you want to
Sí, de todo modo. Muchas gracias, muchas gracias. Siga sintonizada. Eso mismo estamos hablando ahorita. Pero sí, de todo modo, claro que sí. Definitely, that's a call. I'm just saying, I certainly back that. There's only so much that sometimes I feel a little bit powerless because I'm always there. And I always end up, sometimes, developing a bit of a complex because when you're always there and it's an empty room, you can't help but feel like a busybody. I don't let it get to me. I'm going to always be involved. I've never been a sideline type of person. But I don't spectate. I observe. But beyond that observation, there has to be participation. I always make sure that I meet both ends of that spectrum. But we need more people there, period.
True.
To say that we need more people there from the black and brown community, that's foregone. That's without a doubt. Because often what we do is we react. And I got to touch on the Facebook hot takes. Too often, now that it's become almost a spectator thing, where the meetings are broadcast, and I go back, I've been going to meetings for almost 22 years straight. They were on tripods, wires everywhere. We didn't have that state-of-the-art system that we have now where it's simulcast online, Facebook, via the web, and also on the White Rose Community Television. I go back to when it was York Community Access Television. It was YCAT.
Yeah.
And it was low tech. All right? Way back when I would get interviewed on tape, cassette tape, by the radio reporters. That's how far back. Lee Smallwood, Vicky Washington. When we speak on legacy, I want to break down some stuff with Vicky Washington, one of the first councils I had the privilege to address here in the city. We had to make sure we're present because I got to tell you something. There's places that if you try to participate, you either got to have a lot of resources, be extremely well connected, or just be straight up rough and rugged. One of the three. Well, here, you can just step up. You can just step up. I do it. But unfortunately, often what you have is 5 members of council, a few people paid to be there, depending on what's the order of business, 1 or 2 from the administration, myself, and a bunch of empty chairs. Now, you know, that leaves us at a lapse. That leaves us at a lapse because I hear so much feedback when I'm out there. I know that a lot of people are watching. I see people post stuff on Facebook, but unfortunately, I think that people think that that's what really influences policy making. It doesn't. It doesn't. Even when they hear about something, it's not the same until you're there. And I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this with all due respect, and I mean it, but it's disappointing to me. Now, you saw how Councilwoman Jonescu just was out of the chambers like the flash. Perhaps she had somewhere to go. Perhaps it was very pressing, but she was gone, and you missed the opportunity to dialogue, because a lot of times we break away and they say, well, you know what, Manuel, you might have thought this, and I gathered that from what you brought forward today, but this is really what I thought, right? So then we can answer certain questions amongst each other, because I'm not going to guess. I'm not going to guess what a person has in their mind, but I will look at what they're putting forward, and we can surmise what the impacts of that will be. But I can't guess why somebody would want to do something. That shouldn't be on us.
With something that inflammatory, I would have wanted to defend myself if what you had is enough to defend yourself with. Maybe that's why she got going. So.
Maybe she has something very pressing. We don't know. We don't know. I want to hear from people. If somebody's out there, please call in, particularly if you think I'm off base. And the reason I say that is sometimes we have more participation, say, at council. And when you have more voices and you hear each other, you are likely to hear when someone says, well, I think that you're on point here, but I don't know where you went with this point. That's the type of stuff that I want to hear. Because I wonder within myself sometimes, is it really the way that I'm seeing things? Or am I seeing it too much of a certain way just because of the vantage point, just because I'm always there? You get stuck at looking at things a certain way. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's just a thing that happens. That's why I bring stuff to folks like yourself and other people that I respect to make sure that it's not just me within my own head, because that can also be a trap. And I think that's what a lot of the folks that are supposed to represent us, say on council, for example, they get stuck in their own heads. And I don't think that they consult properly, because the minimum levels of consultation, if it was actually put forward in good faith, would have definitely seen this not be a thing. There's no way.
All right. Yes, the call-in number is 717-846-5067 if you have any questions or comments for the discussion. Very important discussion that we're having tonight. 717-846-5067. You're welcome to call in. Is there, since you're such a regular voice at City Council, which we appreciate and need, we need more people, including myself, to follow your lead. Is there anything else you want to share about some policies or anything going on?
I mean,
at City Council, I know it's a lot.
I don't know if you guys just saw, we passed, city just passed went through a whole process where we amended some landlord-tenant language.
Yes, that was very controversial.
Well, it was a problem because, now I missed the committee meeting. I meant it sincerely when I said that I really wanted to make that committee meeting, because it's difficult to then confine yourself to that short period where it's actually introduced and acted on. Remember, it goes to committee. Once a bill or a resolution passes committee, at least it'll sit for 2 weeks, and then it will come up again in a legislative session once it passes committee. Well, I was only able to discuss the landlord-tenant issues when it was actually up for action. Now, a lot of the language there we had already confronted. Way back in 2014, I was heavily involved in those matters because folks were facing eviction for simply being deemed disruptive, while at the time they were being deemed nuisances. Bills were passed at the state level. Unfortunately, here we had to threaten a lawsuit. I was part of that, and we meant it, and they knew it. That didn't happen, thanks largely to Carol Evans, thanks even to Helfrich. He was late to respond. Quite honestly, the entire city was late to respond. But we did get the corrective action. So that language that we had back in the day, where say if somebody was a victim of domestic violence and they called the police, well, if you called one too many times, literally, you accrued a certain amount of points, you're out the door. Now, this was happening across the country. This is part of the problem where they copy and paste these pieces of legislation, these ordinances, from one municipality to the next. It should never be one size fits all. But when they do these things, that's also one of the reasons why in a place like this, you'd end up with such problematic ordinances. They just copy what other places do. Well, now it's back. But it's just back in a different form. They gave the police and the property inspectors the power to determine who is and who isn't a disturbance as a tenant.
Okay.
Now that's a huge problem, and I'm going to tell you what's going to happen, and this is not a promise. You can call it a testament. The city's going to get sued. The city's going to get sued. That's what's going to happen. Because there's nothing. Well, they're going to end up affecting the wrong person, and somebody's going to bring a case. Mark my words. Mark my words. And we're not the only municipality facing these things. We've been here in 2014. Henry Nixon tried to bring it back. I was out of the area when he tried to bring it back. Now it came back again, just in a different form, where they're giving the property inspectors and the police the ability to determine that a tenant is disruptive. Now, of course, they didn't put any clauses in there that say, hey, listen, if there's shouting, if there's glass breaking, if there's multiple calls to the police, and it's an abuse victim, well, there should be some sort of language, some people have said, but that's not going to be enough. Sometimes the police, when they respond to a case of abuse, they don't always code it that way.
Yeah.
If I get mad and I smash a bottle,
Yeah.
and perhaps the victim of the abuse is not somebody that has the wherewithal or the means, or is not in the right frame of mind under such a traumatic circumstance to carry forward with charges for different reasons, they might put in the record criminal mischief. So now you have criminal mischief. If a property inspector is too zealous, or a police officer reports it as criminal mischief, why is the criminal mischief happening at your household, Mrs. Gomez or Mr. Gomez? And you say, whoa, that's not really what that is. Well, listen, that's what the paperwork says. Now you have to confront your government and your abuser. Often the abusers take advantage of those situations.
Well, how come?
This has happened before. This is not something new to the city of York. It's something that is a problem all across the country. For that language to come back, and my question to City Council during the last meeting, not this one, the one previous, was, did you even consult? Now, listen to the trend. I said, did you even consult with any domestic violence advocacy groups, with any tenant advocacy groups? If you say, well, listen, you don't have a tenant advocacy group, well, find the voices.
Mm-hmm.
I can name you some. We can all name some. Now, talk to Anu, talk to the movement, talk to Brother Gito, talk to Tanya Larry, talk to the folks that we know would know. Talk to maybe some of the folks at YWCA that hear the stories from survivors, because there are domestic violence advocacy groups here for survivors. And they will be able to give you the feedback of what it actually looks like in the real world, what something like this might end up being when it comes to putting someone in a more precarious situation. But it doesn't appear that they do these consultations. Now, what they tell me is, well, what we needed to do is we had to make sure we clamp down on the landlords that are absentee, and we got to get a hold of the student housing all along Jackson and all of that. And that's one that is a third rail for them. They didn't want to speak on that publicly. And if you notice that when we were at the council meeting yesterday, I mentioned how they will put forward a policy and they'll purport that it's to address one thing, where really they want to address something else. And it's almost like a prepackaged function creep, because it's not even a tool meant for what you're saying it is. You're crafting a tool for an entirely other use, and you're not being forward about it. Well, they want that for problems with student housing, but they're too afraid to say that publicly. And I called it paternalistic when we were talking about it at council, the landlord-tenant language itself, because all the tenants now are going to go into a database. This database must be kept up to date. The database provides that you have a certain timeline if you're a landlord, that if a tenant moves out and someone moves in, you have to update it within a certain amount of time. That's a problem logistically for landlords that have large businesses, right? That's one for them, but that's a business aspect.
Right.
But if you're trying to help me as a tenant and you say you want to lasso the landlords, why are you so paternalistic and telling me you now have to put me in a database kept by the city to make sure that I'm safe? Well, under what powers? And that's the thing. So typically when they will introduce an ordinance, there's some sort of powers. They'll use what they call their general policing powers or some other statute. They'll cite it. They didn't cite any powers. They're just saying we're going to construct this database, we're going to keep the database, and the landlords have to keep it up to date. And you know what's going to happen? The landlords are going to always keep it up to date, because if they don't keep it up to date, they lose their rental license.
Okay.
That cuts off their money. And no landlord is going to
Right.
go to bat for you, for me, or for anyone else at the loss of their privileges to rent their property. So they're going to update that database zealously. They're going to do it diligently. And where does this database go? If ICE comes knocking and they say, hey, I heard you got a couple Santa Marias, Gomez's, and Rodriguez's here. We saw a Mexican flag here. Give me that database. I want to see who's really living on Queen Street. What does that sound like? This is what this database could potentially open you up to. Again, Councilman Janovsky, when, and it sounds like we're dumping on her, but we're not. This just happens to be the correct course of action here because this is who actually proposed some of this and was one of the biggest backers. When Councilwoman Buck brought up privacy, she didn't bring up the database specifically. She brought up privacy. She said, listen, I have concerns with privacy here. It was hand waved away by Councilwoman Johnson. She said, there's no privacy because when you own the property, you're on the deed, which is quite, she shows a steep level of confusion because a deed is not your place of residence. You might own 17 properties all along Duke Street.
Right.
Doesn't mean you live in any one of them.
Exactly.
A deed is a record that is to hold true, and that's for a different purpose.
Yes, sir.
It wouldn't even account as a place of residence. Go try to get a state ID at a driver's license center with a deed. They're going to laugh you right out and say, get out of the way. We have people with real documentation that can prove their place of residence. Ptah, right?
For sure.
And I think that she knows this. Now, we need to have protections. If you're going to place my information in a database, how do you safeguard it now, these databases? Who do you share it with? You might think it's far-fetched that I say ICE might come knocking and say, listen, I saw one too many Mexican flags, a Dominican flag, a Haitian flag. Give me a database with this street. Are they going to say no? Now, the database would have never existed if it wasn't for this language. So there's many, many problems with it. It's also very unenforceable, which that's another problem. When you introduce policy that's unenforceable, you're tying up resources. You're making it so that good policy doesn't have the ability to actually be made.
When you say it's unenforceable, what you mean?
How are they even going to enforce it? Think about it. When you hear the property inspectors now say, well, we have a backlog. We can't do this. It's so difficult. We can't rein them in. I could tell you from my experience of 22 years now, and I told this to one of the reporters, she chuckled. I said, I'm not playing. This is probably the 10th stab we've taken as a city to try to do something with what they call absentee landlords and problem tenants and all of that. But unfortunately, too often with government, almost always the case if it's our community, the cure is worse than the disease. Far too often. Their antidote is worse than the disease. Now you're telling me I'm in a database. I don't know what you're doing with this database. And anybody that bring into my home, because whether you rent or not, that is your home. Doesn't matter if it's a deed or a lease, that is your home. You got to place that person in a database. Now, what if I don't want to? I can't say no. Because my landlord says, listen, I want your true and proper name. I need to update this and I need to give it to the city. Not to keep it in their records. That's a different story. I need to give it to the city. And the city will then keep it. We don't know what they do with it from there. I'm going to tell you a story. I worked for a company downtown for some years. This company had access to large amounts of information. There was an officer with the York City Police Department, and I have no worries saying this. I hope it goes far. The officer's still with the department. This officer had a habit of coming to several businesses that he knew that kept these types of broad lists of information. Now I want to identify the business, so I got to speak very generically. He would come in and say, hey, listen, we want to know a little bit about this person. Give me what you got. Now, this business owner came to me and said, I'm starting to feel dirty. Every time this officer comes in, I feel like I want to help, but this doesn't seem right. And I said, well, it's not right. You see, it's not right. Because you cannot request from a business that is keeping records in due course. As a course of that business, you can't have a police officer come in and say, give me those records. Okay? Right. It's like if a police officer wanted to see, did Manuel buy a lot of guns last month? Did Manuel buy, think whatever the controversy of the day is. And they wanted to see, or if they wanted to track my mobility patterns, which they have a lot of ways to do. But I don't drive, so you can't scan my license plate. There is none. But if they wanted to say, well, let's track him by every time he swipes that phone of his. Okay, and they see my transactions, and for them to get that from a business, they would need a warrant. Yes. This is clear. You don't have to be a lawyer to know this. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a high school dropout. But if you can just go to a business or the city and say, hey, give me access to these records and these databases. Now, this is how they interfere with your right to assemble. This is how they interfere with your right to peaceably gather. This is how they interfere with your ability to be a free, dignified person. In those ways. Is it still happening now? I don't know. But I can tell you, and I put my name on it, that officer is still with the city. I don't know if he's still engaging in those practices. But I know that anytime that you open the door to those practices, human nature makes it as such that you're going to want to do things that you should be stopped from doing. And we simply should be the ones making sure that we have those guardrails when policies get put forth. We have to be present to make sure that our interests are respected. It's not about being a conspiracy theorist. It's about making sure that we are in a proper standing. Regardless of what they want, we have to make sure that we're secure with whatever they're doing so that we're not impacted in the wrong ways. And all of these things that we talked about now, and that hour flies by, was just 2 sessions of city council. That's it. Now imagine what could happen in an entire legislative calendar year.
I see. Thank you for the knowledge and the eye-opening ideas of what goes on behind the scenes. And everyone that can hear the sound of my voice right now, we're the community. So we need to be aware of these decisions and these policies, and we need to speak up and even become indignant when some of those things negatively affect us. So
righteous indignation.
Righteous indignation, for sure.
When they had policies here where they tried to pass, say, something, again, follow the theme, an anti-loitering ordinance they tried to pass. Now, what was in the anti-loitering ordinance? A clause that said, of course, a policy hack like myself would see it, but you need more people there, but there's certain things that are, again, flagrant. They jump off the page. And it said if you have 3 or more people gathered, and you talk about black codes, it said if you have 3 or more people gathered, and among them, they have so much as disorderly conduct, they're a gang. I kid you not. Now that was introduced here. We fought that tooth and nail. Vicky Washington was one of the ones that helped us fight that from the other side of the table. I'll never forget her quote, and I'm going to give her flowers. Vicky sat behind that table, and I remember she said, this sounds to me like you want to haul all the kids in the white t-shirts off the corners, and this is the tool for you to do it. Mm-hmm. And I remember pointing out that they were so zealous in doing that they didn't even mention what you would traditionally consider gang behavior, sexual assaults, grand theft auto. They didn't even put that in there. Mm-hmm. This is at the time when we had then Police Chief Wes Cayley running around to the York Rotary Club and everywhere else saying that we had 40 gangs at one point, he would say. Mm-hmm. When we had weed and seed, where they did a whole lot of weed and not a lot of seeding. Mm-hmm. And they would write grant applications and say, we were so dangerous, we got 40 gangs and operating in the city. And then they would craft these ordinances to back the narrative that they were themselves building. Mm. And we were just sitting back being rocked to sleep. Oh, it's just a loitering ordinance, they would say. And if you would watch it in the news, they would say, well, the city of York is proposing a loitering ordinance. And see, this crazy man, Manuel Gomez, is against it. But they don't really tell you why. Because that's the type of stuff that they bury in these ordinances. And again, it's a pattern. That's why you have to be there to really catch it.
Yes, sir.
And really actually confront it.
You've been opening my eyes. And anybody else that's listening right now, I will be zeroing in on some more of these dealings as well.
Please
get it from the seed before it takes root. Because too many of us will complain when something's already developed and the weed is already developing, is affecting us. But to get it at its essence, it requires us.
The thing that concerns me, because I try to speak up for the voiceless, is back to the apartments and how they record calls. A domestic violence. How is a domestic violence victim turn into a perpetrator?
Unfortunately, you got to think about the way that the language is written when they say that a disruption is occurring, a disturbance. That's all that the language states plainly. It doesn't say why. It doesn't even care why. You have to read the language for what it is, and that's the problem. Because a disturbance can take many forms. It's quite disturbing to hear a brother and a sister in combat, in strife. Mm-hmm. You know what that sounds like? We all know what it sounds like. We've been there, we've seen it, we've experienced these traumas in different ways. It's not a pleasant sound. It's not a pleasant thing. Those type of disturbances could easily see somebody that's already suffering and already having to fight to survive now have to confront their own government. And then once you have that on your record and you're evicted, you forget about it. You have an eviction on your record for something like that. And listen, don't think that it's implausible. It happens all the time. It happens all the time. But who really speaks for them? They're not in a position to bring it forward. And we have to be the ones that have to make sure to call it out. Now, sadly, when I brought that forward, there wasn't much dialogue. Yeah, it went all throughout the news. But in terms of the actual policymakers themselves, we didn't really hear much. We didn't really hear much. That language passed, and it is what it is. And that's why I tell you, they end up getting sued.
Yes, sir.
It's my prediction.
Well deserved.
There's Violence Against Women Act, which people sometimes think is just because it says violence against women that it only protects women. No. Rep. Stevens passed an act here in Pennsylvania, in the Pennsylvania legislature, that furthered protections when it comes to seeking help by calling 911. A lot of people don't know that's a First Amendment protected activity. It's considered free speech. A lot of people don't know that. You can never be punished by your government for calling 911 if it's a legitimate call, of course. A lot of people don't know that. So when you make these, that's why I say they're going to get sued. Because the day that somebody calls 911 or is unfairly deemed a disturbance, and especially if it's something like that, for me, and I can tell you, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a high school dropout, I'll say it again, it's a slam dunk. Even Rep. Stevens' bill and even the Violence Against Women Act was further updated in 2022, explicitly states that you can go after your local government if they put you in that position. They made it easier than ever to go after your local officials if they put you in a position to suffer that way.
It's already been done. When I went to school years ago for criminal justice, I was directed towards a book, and I still have it. I would have brought it if I knew you was going this way. It's called Dial 911 and Die. And it's about people in almost any state, where one of the most glaring ones was in D.C., where women had called the police because they had complained about a burglary. They lived on a duplex, like in Philadelphia. They have two different levels. And when the police was called, the robbers went out on the roof so they weren't noticed inside. And the ladies told them that it was someone broke into their house. They just went out on the roof. The police, all they did was circle around. They didn't do a thorough inspection and left. And the guys came back in and then raped the women for several hours. And this happened in D.C. in the early 80s, I believe. And they sued the city because they didn't do a proper inspection. They just went around. They said, "Oh, we didn't see anything." So it's so many cases that happen like this where the police didn't show up, or they showed up and didn't do a proper inspection. It's a whole thick book called Dial 911 and Die.
You know, here locally, the police can be put in a certain position because they can end up being the ones that bear the brunt of what the people see, and they can end up in a lawsuit. Because of course, if you're deemed a disturbance because you called the police for a legitimate reason, it's natural that you're going to think that the police had something to do with it, if that makes sense. At least that's how I would see it. And that happens all the time. But imagine also the situation you have a landlord in. Again, a landlord's not going to just lose their rental privileges and the ability to make money just because you need to be covered and you're a survivor. And that's just one scenario. There's other scenarios where that type of situation can end up in a messy situation. I'm just shocked that it went through, to be quite honest. But until we have more people participating at that level, this is what we're going to see, unfortunately. I do want to say it's not all doom and gloom. The city recently authorized the purchase using federal funds mostly, not local money. They bought another drone. There's a fleet of drones here in the city. I don't think everybody knows that now. They have about 3. Now, the drones are going to be used mostly for emergency scenarios. They're not going to be used for surveillance. This is explicit in their policies. Okay. And it's what I wanted to bring up, that things are different now. Now, back in the day, whenever they would introduce something, say a new piece of technology would be deployed by the police here, and I remember I would contact Chief Cayley, let's just use an example, or Commissioner Whitman back in the day, way back in the day, and I would say, well, what type of license plate scanner are you going to deploy? They would say, well, I'm not telling you, and then I would have to file a right to know request. Wasting money, wasting resources, wasting time. You get the right to know request. Then what you would find, and this is as recent as 2013, they did this. They say it's national security. You don't need to know what type of license plate scanners we're using because that's national security. And they'll quote some obscure clause because there's always a law they can hide under. Then at that point, you either got to be a dog about it and stay on it, or you pick and choose your battles and move on. Often we have to move on. It's just not like that anymore. You know, was in touch with Captain Lentz, and these days, I had a question the other day, a policy question. I contacted the department, asked Captain Lentz, I said, do you have a drop system? He knows what it is, he's involved with the drones. It's where they attach stuff with the drones. Okay. Pick stuff up, put stuff down. They call it a drop system. And he said, yeah, we do. We're gonna use it for search and rescue. That would have never got that response before. You know what I'm saying? That's something I said, well, why do you want to know? It ain't none of your business. Are you hiding something? Go file a right to know request. You see, that type of stuff, when you have that type of participation and you can get that type of dialogue, that's key. Because moving forward, we need to have a hand on anything that is deployed in our community. So we can determine if we want that technology and how we want that technology to take form. You see, it was a lot more difficult before. These days, we have to take advantage of some of those privileges that we built for ourselves. This hasn't been given. We fought for this. We got to take advantage of those privileges and build on it. That's why I tell people all the time, come out. People talk to me all the time. They say, listen, I heard about this, I heard about that. They got so many good ideas. But you got to bring them forward, man. You got to come with it. You got to come with it. You got to come with it.
Can you let the people know when the city council meetings are?
Yeah. So right now, city council is in recess. So they're only going to be meeting once a month, and they won't be having committee meetings until about September. The calendar for city council meetings is on yorkcity.org. You go to yorkcity.org, there's a tab that says government. You click there, you'll see York City Council. Click through there, there's a calendar that will show you the meeting dates. We have one of the best city clerks I've ever had the pleasure of working with. I'm a policy hack, I'm not just active here. You have Diana Thompson's been there for 28 years, who's a treasure. So the city clerk's job is to handle all those administrative aspects that flow through the city council and more. I call her the glue. Now, anybody could call Diana, ask her about public comment, how things work in city council. She'd be more than happy. I see her do it all the time to guide you through anything you need to know. I know you've had interactions with the dedication requests and so on. And that's something that anybody can do. That's something that anybody can do. And I wish more people came forward because what we have here is something unique. I'm telling you. And it's not about size. People say, oh, it's because York is small. I've been in places, for example, when I mentioned the policy and dealing with the police, for example, I had one recently that was actually in Virginia. And you can't even talk to the police. You got to deal with a project manager. It's nonsense. And to change a period on one page, you got to go through a whole process. Listen, what we have here is way different. But you can lose that. We can lose that.
Yes, sir.
We work hard to build towards it. And you get a police department that becomes responsive. You got to work on that. Make sure that we can build on that. Because listen, if not, we can just go backwards again. And I'm not trying to see it go backwards. It's always a sacrifice for me. Just to be able to make it out, it's not easy. It's not easy. I would like to see more people roll up, to be straight up.
We need
Steph Seaton, may she rest in peace. We had talks, man, and it never happened, but we wanted to do, because I like to model myself after Steph. I had an appreciation for the way she did things. Strong, but just had a way of posturing what she would put forward, and I'm just always an admirer. One thing we wanted to do, and it never came to fruition, and I feel very down about it, was we wanted to put something together to give the people to make stuff like city council meetings way more approachable. Break it down in our language, you know what I mean? Digestible ways, make it something that hits home, you know what I'm saying? demystify it so that you can say, man, this is something I could do. And I'm going to be real with you. Some people, I might lose them with this. I tell cats all the time, because I know we off the, so I might talk a little different. We might code switch now. I tell cats all the time, if you can break down a football game, 11 positions, who might get injured, who didn't get injured, how they catch, when they don't catch, when they could break down that play, the routes, all these different ways. Dude, that's statistics, that's probability, that's dissection, that's interpretation. Some of that is pageantry to it, because there's oration. They can speak it, they can kick it, they can make it fun. What? If you could do that for that, you could do that for these ordinances, yo. You know what I'm saying?
I feel you.
So what's up? It's about where we put our energy.
Yeah.
That's not an attack on nobody. I'm just saying, man, you can like what you like. I love music.
Let's bring it back to life.
I love music, but I'm going to make sure that if I'm going to enjoy my music, it ain't going to be while the city is just suffering while we can actually do something about it. You know what I'm saying? We got to have priorities, man. We got to have priorities. There's so many sharper minds, man. I'm not even anywhere near some of the sharper minds that we have in the city. I just wish they would really come forward, man. We need it dearly. And no, I'm not running. And I should have said this when we were actually on WRCT. I ain't running for nothing. Sometimes people see you appear. I don't do many interviews these days. And people think that maybe you're posturing for something. I'm not running for anything.
I feel you.
This was something that we brought forward as way of an update. The brother extended an invite, which I'm very honored to have received, and that's all that it is. And it was, of course, a call to action. It's a call to action. I'm going to see you on that mental health walk, brother. I'm glad that you do that.
Thank you for that little
And I
segue.
appreciate this. Oh, because it can't go without mentioning, that gives me wings. You know, it's tough. I leave some of these meetings myself. I'm going to be real with you. And I don't even know sometimes. I say, I don't even know how far I went. I don't know if I made any sense. Not that it matters, because I don't prepare written statements.
Yes, sir.
I just kick it. It's just my style. And sometimes I wonder. And when I get messages and people tell me, listen, no, you weren't bugging out. When I can consult with people, it helps.
Yes, sir.
To have something like the mental health walk is going to be something like, for me, that's key, because I need that. You need to see your people, but you only can't be around your people when you're in situations of strife. We have to see each other when we're also more at ease.
For sure.
And for me, being at council is always something that is adversarial. So it's better to be amongst the people in a way that is just a lot more calming, man. And I'm looking forward to it on Sunday, for sure. For sure. And I thank you for putting it together, because I know you had it before COVID got all in the mix. And then it sort of died down a little bit. And I definitely want to be there now going forward, man. I know I need it. I know so many of us need it. You know, it's not too big when they assign months and all of that, but it is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. Am I right or wrong?
Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yeah, it's like Men's Mental Health Awareness Month.
I don't think it's men's.
I think that's what I saw online, and you know how when you go online, you could be led the wrong way, but I think that's what I saw.
That's kind of the gist of it.
I know it's mental health. I didn't know if it was specifically for men. But you may be right.
But you know, for me, it's always, that's why I'm not so big on that. I guess there's a reason why they do that, but to me, we should always be focused on that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Particularly for men.
Yes,
And thank you for that little segue. So this upcoming Sunday, so we're returning for the Penn Park, 9 a.m. this upcoming Sunday, Men's Mental Health Walk. This is an opportunity to come out in the spirit of brotherhood, mental health, and actually join in with us in the brotherhood. And we're going to be taking little walks around the city, making a showing as far as us coming together as a community. And that's going to be every Sunday. We want to hear from you. We want to have your participation there. And thank you for the wonderful guests that we have on here today. It's just bringing these particular things to light. Like you said, if we are able to, you're able to break down some fantasy football and you got your mind on that, what about the mandates, the policies, and the bylaws that are affecting you and I on a day-to-day basis? So where you put your priority, where your power goes, where your focus goes. So at this day and time, it's very important for us to get realigned to the things that are the most important to us. So we'll kick it to you, Shareef.
Is there anything else that you wanted to share before we
Thank you. No, thank you for having me. I hope to see people out there paying attention, making sure that we're all heard, and pitching in.
Okay. All righty. Well, this has been a most powerful and much needed edition of the Hour of Power. This is what we do. This is what this platform is about. And if you have anything that you want to share that educates us, just let me or Ptah know, and we'll get you scheduled on the Hour of Power. Thank you and good night.
Next week? We got
Next week, let's see. Next week we have a very powerful sister in our community, Miss Marissa Shockley, is scheduled to come on, and she's gonna share some things and get some things off of her chest that she's been wanting to share. So definitely tune in next week as we have Marissa Shockley on. Peace and blessings.